Welcome to Behind the ABA Talk podcast, where we have heart-to-heart conversations with expert speakers from the LSGurdin Consulting Continuing Education program hosted by Behavior Live. Join us as we learn more about their professional journeys and hear about what inspires them to do their amazing work. I'm your host, Lisa Gurdin, founder of LSGurdin Consulting. I want to say thank you to our CE sponsors and partners, Massachusetts Partnership for Youth, Lab Collaborative, Accept Collaborative, and QBS Safety Care. Today's guest is Dr. Catherine Rossi. She and her colleague, Dr. Shannon Berry, will be presenting a two-part continuing education series in December and January on school refusal and avoidance. Catherine is a Massachusetts licensed psychologist and behavior analyst, a nationally certified school psychologist, and a licensed special education administrator. She currently supports students with disabilities and develops systems-wide tiered supports. In addition, she's a part-time lecturer in the counseling and ABA department at Northeastern University. And before this, she was the out-of-district coordinator for Watertown Public Schools, a behavior consultant at the May Institute, and she completed her graduate studies in school psychology at UMass Amherst, focusing on social emotional learning, system-wide implementation of tiered supports, PBIS, and school consultation. Her professional and research focuses on focus include developing system-wide frameworks to support students' mental health and supporting students with significant and comorbid disabilities. And Catherine, thank you so much for being here. You have so much to offer, and I'm so excited to talk with you.
Thank you, Lisa. It's always a mind shift when people are reading out my bio because I'm like, I've
Right?
done a lot.
You've
I've
done
done a
a
lot.
lot, right? Absolutely, you have. And you have so much to share. I really would love to hear about your professional journey. You have done so much. So how did that all happen?
So it is a kind of unexpected answer of sorts. So when I was 16, I had a pretty serious cooking accident and ended up with third degree burns across 8% of my body. And that put me in the hospital 2 weeks before Christmas as a 16-year-old. So that was a really fun time. But the biggest motivator for me was the social worker that was assigned to me because I was a minor could not get out of her head that I didn't do this self-injuriously. And it took and she was very adamant that this was self-injurious in nature, and it didn't. My mother and my parents, both my parents, stepped in. My mom and dad, the doctor, and then finally the lead doctor for the burn unit had to step in and be like, "You have to lay off of this child. She did. This was an accident. This was not." And to put her in check of just immediately jumping to the assumption of a severity of an injury of this severity must obviously be self-injurious. And that kind of put me on the journey of I want to do better for young adults and I want to help young adults. And it kind of just propelled me straight. I knew from day one of going to college that I wanted to major in psychology. And that started my psychology journey. And then from there, I had a really great mentor in college, Dr. Maurice Elias, and he introduced me to the entire field of social emotional learning. And he was the one that set me up with on my path to UMass Amherst and said we were talking about grad school. He's like, UMass will be the right fit for you because that's where there's a lot of SEL research right now, only second to Oregon. And he knew I didn't want to go out to the West Coast. And that's where I met Dr. Sarah Wickham, who was my advisor all through grad school and is still one of my advisors to this day. And she basically has molded me into the direction that I took because I kind of followed in her footsteps, going to the May and following in this field. And now I'm cutting out my own path in SEL and behavior and MTSS. And I just, to change paths from Sarah a little bit, decided to become a BCBA along the way because it's obligatory when you work at the May.
Yeah. Yes, I've worked with a lot of professionals at the Maine Institute actually over the years. And I think that's a great path. I didn't do that. I have a master's degree in applied behavior analysis. And I think if I were to go back and do it again, I would have done that dual route. I think that's just a great training to have to really fully support the students and families that we work with. I just think it's a great professional path for sure. Um, and so tell me about Shared Minds. Tell me how that came about. Tell me what that's about. This with Shannon Berry.
Yes.
Yeah, tell me about that.
So Shannon and I have known each other since grad school. We were two cohorts apart and we were became very close in grad school. And people always joke that we were inseparable and shared a brain because we just had very similar ways of thinking, ways of problem solving, and we balance each other out really well. Of I can be more like jump first and ask questions later, and Shannon's like, no, we're going to ask the questions first and then jump later. So we're the perfect yin and yang. So we decided a couple years ago we really enjoyed the systems level work that we're doing, and we really enjoy speaking to audiences and using our consultation and training experiences. So we said, let's figure out what to do with this. Let's do something. Let's make our own private practice. And that's how Shared Minds came to be. So right now we're starting small. We're speaking next month and in January with you. We're doing an MPY series starting in February to plug that about vocational education. So that'll be something very new and different for us, or not for us, but new and different for our audience. And so that is very exciting. And then we also supervise candidates who are trying to apply for their licensed educational psychologist license. And we do 2 year training cohorts for those. And it's just a really fun, different opportunity for us outside of our traditional day jobs and our teaching at Northeastern and working in our districts.
Amazing, amazing. I love, as you know, I've done that in my work, and
Yeah.
I have so many ideas that I just want to be able to do everything, and really support as many people as we can. So I appreciate what you guys are doing, and it's so fun.
It is really fun, and it made the two of us no longer working together because we Shannon and I, for another tie to our connectiveness, worked together at Assabet for 5 years, and we shared a wall between our offices and could just like talk to each other through our wall. So now that we no longer work together, we have our business to also keep us connected in a whole other way of just communicating 24/7.
That's so nice. And Assabet is a local Massachusetts technical high school,
Correct.
right?
It's a Chapter 74 technical high school in Marlboro, servicing Marlboro, that corner of Middlesex and mostly Worcester County schools.
Wonderful, wonderful. So tell me about school refusal. Like how, what was maybe your first client or your first student who had this experience? And why is it something you wanna talk about?
I think the reason that I think school refusal really interests Shannon and I, and it interests a lot of people, because it's one of those puzzles that we have yet to crack. I feel like for every single one of us probably has dealt with a school refusal case and dealt with the frustrations of school refusal. And that's what really motivates us to continue to crack the egg of trying to find a solution. The first school refusal case that I worked on was at the May for a student who the mother was saying was exhibiting significant school refusal symptoms, and also had a medical disability that kept him um, in the bathroom for long periods of time. And so I started working on doing a home assessment for this student and doing interviews with the student, with his mother, with his parent, all separately to kind of hear each of their parts of the story and get all 3 different perspectives. And some of the underlying root causes really were access to tangibles, because the student's like, hey, I'm in high school. When my parents go to work, I could just say, when they're getting ready for work, I could just say, I'm not feeling well. And then he goes into the bathroom and has free reign access to the home Wi-Fi, his phone, any technology. So it was a much more motivating environment for him than having to go to school and sit under the school expectations. So I found that pattern to be fairly similar through a lot of my threads in my cases, the access to tangibles motivator, and then some degree of, I don't want to call it parent enabling, but also like it's hard to find a better word at times, because sometimes it's just also just really challenging for parents when they have to have their life and responsibilities and get to work on time or log on to a meeting, and they can't necessarily monitor, oversee, or set the parameters, or have trouble setting parameters for their own children, or have some of their own comorbid um, difficulties that are making it challenging for them to help support their students, their child. So then it's just really complicated in a sense because then they ask the school to step in or they ask their third party service provider, and you're asking a family from an outside lens to put some of these barriers to place that make home less desirable, that are asking the parent to join in like a wraparound set of care for collaborative approaches. And you're met with different levels of resistance, different levels of success. But it's really hard, we've found, to be the school provider in these cases when working as that agency, because so often you realize this is why community agencies and community support really need to be involved to help break that cycle of school refusal.
Yeah. I found also in my experience with school refusal that parents have, by the time you get involved, parents have now this history of trying to take technology away, trying to set limits. And the child has learned to engage in really explosive or extreme shutdown behavior. And the parents don't want, it's been so punishing for them and so difficult
Yes.
for them to do that. So there's an avoidance on the parents' part. And the longer it goes on, the longer this history happens and the harder it is to change. Can you talk about that a little bit, about kind of that history and this pattern? And like, you know, sometimes it's gone on by the time you get involved for years. I mean, for a while. What can you talk about that a little bit?
So most of my school refusal casework has been with high school students. So by the time they're coming to us, either as in whatever degree, like as a freshman, or if we're called in, depending on which agency I was with at the time, and we're called in as a third party provider, they've been engaging in degrees of this behavior since elementary school. I have a student that I just was working with over the last couple of years who started engaging in this behavior in fourth grade. And it started as manifesting as extreme anxiety. And the mother just enabled it and saying that, oh, she's too anxious to go to school and all these different things. And it ultimately set her up for this track of having very disrupted sleep cycles. So she would be up all night on her phone, her computer, and she really loved art. So she would just be doing art things on her computer and then would sleep until 1 o'clock. And then if you tried to wake her up at 7 o'clock, it was a full meltdown because she was up since it was like 5 hours later. So as a teenager, you know the importance of needing sleep. So she was not in a position to do that. And also physically, these are young adults. They are physically sometimes the same size or larger than their parents. So that I found is a really interesting and important layer to keep in mind, because you don't want to put the parent at danger to try to help interfere, especially with some of that challenging behavior. Like I had one student, because he was a large 17-year-old male, he just put his mattress in front of his door and just barricaded himself in the room, and was like, and the parents were like, if this isn't worth it for us to injure ourselves or like damage our home to get you out of your bedroom, and so we'll just leave you there.
Right, right. I think in addition to sort of the tangibles, as far as function of that, I have found that avoidance function of just, having the kids avoid discomfort, avoid the school, anything that are stressors in the context of school. And once avoidance hits and they're reinforced by it, it is so powerful for them and so hard to shift. Um, yeah, I don't know, in your experience, what have you found to be helpful in those scenarios?
And that's where it gets really hard, because that's where it's still falling in that tough nut to crack category. And I think one thing people that I've spoken to over the last couple of years, thinking specifically about your avoidance function, are chalk a lot of it up to COVID and like, oh, COVID school and kids were online a lot and blah, 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 blah. But I like to challenge and push back on that, because I had equally as many school refusal cases that presented the exact same way prior to COVID. Definitely not a issue that manifested during COVID. It's something that if you're going to exhibit these extreme cases of school refusal, it doesn't matter what the general conditions of the world are. You're gonna if you want to avoid the demands of going to school, you want to avoid those demands of social academic challenges, you're going to figure out ways to do it. And it's really hard. Like the case I was working with more recently, the one who the mother has been enabling the child since fourth grade. She was able to get permission, she being the mother, to have her daughter complete these radical, non-traditional assignments to get her to pass through her grades, like through like from class year to year, including like drawing a workbook of just her favorite characters, and like maybe I think she wrote a couple math problems on there, and that was how she passed from like fifth grade to sixth grade. And I was like, what is this caliber of work? Like, what are we ultimately teaching our children at the same time? Because being in a vocational school, one of the things that constantly was on my mind prior was when students are graduating as seniors, we're training them to be workplace ready, to jump right into the workforce and join, and literally I think it says become like productive members of a team in the charter. So how are we helping students become productive workplace members if we're figuring out, if we're not able to break the cycle of this refusal case? And what does this ultimately teach them? So when they become 18, 19, are they still going to be at home and
Right.
engaging to work, or will they figure out a way that works for them to be successful? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. I'm glad that you have said a few times how difficult this is and it's a puzzle to crack because that's really validating for those of us who are working in this space that and with these kiddos and families and school teams. It's just they're really hard and there's not really a one size fits all solution. Um, but can you talk a little bit about your approach, or with some of the things that you have found to be successful, with these cases?
I think one of the biggest success factors is how ready the parents are to engage and be reflective in changing some of their own behaviors. Because all too often you feel like the parents are either trying to wash their hands of the situation and pass the baton off to someone else who they think can help, and then take all the responsibility off themselves as parents, or are just in complete denial of the situation. So the parents who are showing up ready to like get their hands dirty for and are not afraid to get in the trenches with us, so doing the hard items, including like changing the Wi-Fi password every single day and having like set Wi-Fi locks. I found that to be a really helpful strategy, but it's also really time intensive and interest and obstructive to every other member of the family, because if you're changing the Wi-Fi every single day and sometimes like multiple times a day, every other person on your network has to be comfortable with taking those changes. And or parents who are okay with setting like really firm limits. I had one family who was like, we're just taking the door off of your bedroom and we're going to put a sheet over your door so you have privacy because you're a young adult. But if we need to get into your room, we can't trust you right now to get out of bed in the morning. So we're going to take your door off, put it in the basement. And it had mixed results, admittedly, because it had because of that dignity of not being able to feel like you could have a bedroom door anymore. But it was also a wake up call, and the parents felt empowered by that of like, hey, I can do this. I can set this limit, and this is a very tangible thing that I can do. All I'm doing is taking the door off the hinges and bringing it downstairs, but it's giving me a level of access that I didn't have before to my child. They don't like it. I don't like it at times, but at least it's something that I can do. And I would think another success or another aspect that's been successful is when parents also have the mentality that it's not necessarily trying to pass the blame. So all too often in some of my last couple cases that I've been working out with school refusal, the parents would immediately have this history of multi-year blaming the school, blaming everybody else but themselves and their child, or blaming the like a third party, something out of their control. And that blame mentality doesn't help the problem. It kind of almost turns into like a problem admiration model. And our function and our goal is to figure out what the function is. What are some solutions we can put in place to, even if we're not completely breaking school refusal and your students going to school all day, every day for 5 days a week, maybe we get them in for like an hour a day times five. And that even is leaps and bounds of progress compared to what they might have been doing previously.
And then what about the, when there's a lot of barriers with regards to, what goes on in the home. And I think you mentioned sort of, bringing in community partners because it's kind of like, well, how do you get parents to that point? I mean, as a behavior analyst or as a school social worker, do you collaborate? You bring in community partners because and that takes time, right? And by the time they're at this place, everyone's frustrated and
Yeah.
don't know what to do. Maybe you could talk about that process a little bit because I think you're right. That's a big key in this puzzle and a really hard shift to facilitate.
Yes. So thinking like through my experiences with some of the cases I've been working on, some of my students depend already had a we're already receiving, I'd say, we're already receiving services through an agency. So some of that legwork was already done, and those are the easy cases, in one sense, because it took the enrollment time out of the picture because all you had to do at that point was more collaboration and consultation with all the multiple parties. As you said, the challenging aspect is mostly when I'm in wearing my public school hat and trying to refer parents to community agencies and trying to waitlist hop and figure out who has the quickest waitlist, who has availability for services, and once we know we're on a wait list or what the time for that wait list is, what we can do in the interim to help be a stopgap. Or in the very extreme cases that I've worked on, one, we get the courts involved, and that's a whole separate set of issues. And sometimes not the easiest, one of the better solutions for parents to help them get supports in a faster path is filing that CRA and helping. And I think there's a lot of stigma around filing CRAs, and lots of districts have different opinions on them. And just a CRA, for those who might not remember, Child Requiring Assistance Act with the courts. And that's when you're filing and asking for additional assistance from the state to help figure out where they can help you. And it's also another really lengthy process. But I've found that filing that CRA can sometimes be a wake up call for the family, particularly if the family is checking the box that they are the ones requesting assistance versus the school being the one to file. And it's giving the parents another level. And I've had, after filing these CRAs, DCF involvement happening. And DCF involvement, if those cases get screened in, has been expediting those extra supports. And while they haven't necessarily been the be all end all, because I'm sure everybody has positive and negative experiences with cases screened into DCF, because they are very spread thin with all of their clients, it has helped a little bit of being able to expedite wait lists and get people into services off of wait lists.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's definitely double-edged sword. And I think it takes time and effort to help parents understand the benefits of going that
Yes.
route, right? It's not to report them, it's not, to say how terrible they are as parents. It's to help them get services and like you said, in an expedited way. And that's really interesting. Do you have a success story where you had to put in, implement several different strategies perhaps to make it happen? That's what I
Yeah.
found. It's like all these pieces, like you said, of the puzzle. working with other professionals and agencies and so forth. Can you share a time where that worked and give us some, empower us a little bit, because it is really hard. These cases are hard and take a lot of your brain, a lot of your thinking and worry.
Yeah, and that's where it's kind of the Debbie Downer moment of I'd love to say, yes, Lisa, I have this perfect success story, and here's everything I did, and it took 3 years, but I finally did it. But unfortunately, like looking back, like I have different pockets of things that I've been successful, but unfortunately, I can't say from start to finish, I have one full success story of a student who was like, I came in and we did like really intensive work and treatment. And then all of a sudden, after all this time, we got them into school again. Um, I can say some successes though, on the individual levels of, I had one student who we were having a lot of difficulty with, and the parents were really, really resistant. And this was, I was wearing my public school BCBA hat at this point, resistant to our request for an outside evaluation. And we really thought that the student needed an outside evaluation and an extended placement to really get a different perspective on the school refusal and these behaviors outside of what I could provide as a school-based BCBA. So we got the student set up through a 45 day. And ultimately, the parents ended up, which actually worked out in our favor. They turned down the 45-day, but found her an inpatient at the same facility. And so they sent her for an inpatient treatment stay. And that was really enlightening to the parents of being able to see what intensive treatment looks like. And it gave me a whole different set of resources for people to collaborate with. And that was a really positive experience of having this whole extra set of people who were really also like understanding and appreciative of like, you've tried all these different solutions, we're going to step in now, and we're going to start by trying those same things over again and seeing what I can collect new baseline data, and then start providing some new strategies and approaches. And they were only able to do that because of the setting that they were in. And it got to the point that, you sometimes can't always handle things in a day placement or a 766 or a public school. Like you sometimes need that residential or therapeutic day component of someplace that can take the school demands off and just focus on the treatment side of things.
I really appreciate that so much. And I think it's really important to just realize that this is a team approach. This is the time to collaborate and think outside the box and really think about who can support the student, the family, and the school, really, in figuring out the pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, and collaboration is key. I think that's my biggest successes have been when everybody's been on the same page, when the school and the parents and outside providers are all like, we get it. This is what we're seeing. And our only sole focus is to get the child back on a different path.
Yeah. Um, that's great. And so given that these cases are hard, um, what advice do you have for, practitioners out there to deal with the hard, build that resilience in the context of these cases, which again takes up so much of our thinking and our worrying and our efforts. Yeah, what advice do you have?
First, don't take it personally. Like it's not your responsibility. It's not your fault that the student is gauging a school refusal. Often, like I feel like that, like especially when I'm talking to like new BCBAs or my interns, that they'll take these cases really personally. So don't if that's step number one is take that pressure off of yourself. It's not your fault. You did nothing wrong. Your job is to help. And then next is find your people, find your network, and find those people that you trust to be your sounding board, not necessarily like your colleagues, but who like thinking about like your cohort members or like friends in the field or mentors and have those people that you feel comfortable just picking up the phone and being like, here's what's going on. Or can I shoot you a quick text to show you a picture of a data sheet? And am I on the right track? And having those mentor sounding boards from peers or previous mentors has been so helpful for me, and also just really validating because they might show a fresh perspective or be like, hey, I did the exact same thing last month, and like here's like one or two things that work for me, why don't you try those? And really knowing that you don't have to do this and you shouldn't be doing this in isolation. And I know that can feel really difficult at times if you're a school-based BCBA and you're like the only person in your building who might understand that language, or the only person in your district who might know that language, which makes it even more important to know who your support network is of like-minded individuals outside of your day-to-day work.
Yeah, that's great. Great advice. And then finally, Catherine, can you give us a teaser for your upcoming CE? What should we expect to learn?
So we're going to start with a big theme of our conversation today of it's not your fault that the school refusal is happening, and you're not going to solve it overnight. And really often we don't always solve it. So we're going to really focus on stepping back from problem admiration and looking into and diving into some of those deeper functions and what might solutions be, or solutions to try, and interventions to try to tackle some of those, that access to tangibles, those avoidance behaviors, and understanding that it's a really difficult solution and it's a really long-term problem, but we're not going to admire the problem. We're gonna do what we do as best as behavior analysts. We're going to define the problem. We're going to write an objective, behavior objective for it, and then we're going to start applying really specific interventions that are behavior backed to tackle this problem and collect data on it. And if that doesn't work, we're going to go back to the drawing board and find another intervention and do the exact same thing all over again.
Wonderful. And we have two CE events. We have a part one and a part two to really delve into this topic and really come away with a deeper understanding and strategies that we can use. So I am so excited to have you and Shannon Barry on. So thank you so much for talking about this. Like I said, it's very validating and empowering as well. And so thank you for being
Thank you.
here.
This was a lot of fun, Lisa.
Yeah, good. Yay. Well, this has been Behind the ABA Talk podcast with me, Lisa Gurdin, and our guest, Dr. Catherine Rossi. Be sure to join us for Catherine and Shannon Barry's upcoming CE event, Universal Tier 1 Supports for School Avoidance and Refusal. And that'll be on December 5th from 12 to 1:30 Eastern Time. And if you miss it, no worries. You can always watch it on demand. And you earn CEUs for joining live or on demand. With regards to the podcast, new podcast episodes are released monthly, about a week before each live CE. And to learn more about what we do and the podcast, you can go to www.lsgurdinconsulting.com. And thank you again to our CE partners and sponsors, Massachusetts Partnership for Youth, Lab Collaborative, Accept Collaborative, and QBS Safety Care. And a special thank you to my amazing podcast producer, Cole Hoffman. See you next time.